Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. It's a new year and we meet again. Subhanallah. We're continuing with our teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Intentions for seeking knowledge and teaching. I intend to seek knowledge and to teach, to benefit myself and to benefit others, to remind myself and to remind others, to profit myself and to profit others, to urge adherence to the book of Allah and the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to invite to guidance and to guide to that which is good, seeking the face of Allah, His pleasure, His closeness, and His reward, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Continue on with our Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Ameen. Let's continue on with our dua. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma rzuqna ya Rabbi fahman nabiyyin wa hifdhal mursalin wa ilhamal malaikatil muqarrabin fi afiyati ya arhamar rahimin. Allahumma aftah علينا فتوح العارفين وفقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل واهدنا إلى سواء السبيل. اللهم انفعنا وارفعنا وعرفنا بالعلم النافع وانفعنا به أنفسنا وأهلنا وأوطاننا وديارنا وجميع المسلمين يا إله العالمين. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. الحمد لله. We continue on with our legacy. Start off with Saviors of Islamic Spirit, part 2. We are with Shaykh al-Islam Hafiz Ibn Taymiyyah. We continue on to look at the situation during his time and why his presence was really critical for the Muslims. We look at the political and social conditions. For a proper assessment of the achievements of Ibn Taymiyyah, it is necessary to touch upon the complex of political, social, religious, and intellectual atmosphere of the time within which Ibn Taymiyyah had to struggle for renovation of Islamic thought and social life. Right? So we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah has said there will be a revival of the religion in every century. And we have gone through a number of them who have revived Islam because of the state of the Muslims at that time. Right, so we look at the political, social, religious, and intellectual atmosphere. It was indeed a critical period of Islamic history beset by fast-moving events. 5 years had elapsed since the sack of Baghdad, and 3 years after the capture of Halib and Damascus by the Mongols when Ibn Taymiyyah was born. So this critical time we went through the attack of the Tatars, right, and how they conquered Baghdad and took the Baghdad from the Muslims. Now Halib has been conquered, Damascus has been conquered, and then Taymiyyah was born. So there's a very critical time in the history of Islam. As a child, he must have heard the stories of cruelty and barbarism of the Tatar hordes invading the Muslim lands. When he was 7 years of age, his hometown of Hiran, situated in the north of Mongol-occupied territory of Iraq, falling between the rivers of Euphrates and Tigris, was invaded by the Tatars. So he was very young, right, when his town was invaded by the Tatars. Like numerous other people belonging to that town, his own family moved on towards Damascus to seek a place of safety. Everywhere he saw people terror-stricken, appalled, and panicky, running away for their lives in utter confusion and disorder. We have seen how the Tatars attack and how they plunder and kill and destroy much. Later on, he could never forget the stupefied people scared to death by the brutality of the Tatar legions. Ibn Taymiyyah would also have seen the destruction wrought by the barbaric Tatar legions and heard of the innumerable stories of terrifying cruelty perpetrated by them, which must have raised a storm of hatred in his bosom against the brutal invaders and aroused the feelings of sympathy and compassion for the unfortunate victims of unprecedented tyranny. All right, here we have an opinion of this of the writer. He's assuming all these things about Ibn Taymiyyah, maybe not false, but then again, it is not of the sayings or the reflections of Ibn Taymiyyah himself. At the same time, he must have also heard of the brilliant victory won by Al-Malik al-Zahir Baiba only 3 years before his birth at Ain Jalut. We saw this also, how this general or this king from Egypt intercepted the attacks of the Tatars. It might have imparted into his agitated heart, as to many others of his time, a sense of satisfaction and reassuring confidence in the sword arm of Islam. Again, when you read, you must understand this. It might have imparted, so it might not also. So it is an opinion again here, right? As to many others of his time, a sense of satisfaction. Yeah, it's possibilities there, right? But that is 3 years before his birth. So if this was to be known to him, he would be made aware of it maybe in an 8th or 9th year, which is about 12 years after the conquest of Al-Malik al-Zahir. Now we're going to look at the Mamluks of Egypt. About 12 years before Ibn Taymiyyah was born, the Mamluks had taken over the administration of Egypt and Syria. Interesting, that it is Egypt and Syria. Egypt and Syria is quite a distance to be in control of two countries, which is separated by, of course, we've got Palestine there, right? In Syria, it's a little bit there, maybe, yeah, we've got the Mediterranean Sea there to get to Syria from Egypt. The Mamluks were also known as Bahariya, Bahariya, people of the sea, right? Were the Turk slaves of the last Ayyubid Sultan, Al-Malik al-Salih Ayyub, 647 after Hijrah. So that's about 600 years, more than 660 years after the Prophet ﷺ, 630 years after the Prophet ﷺ has passed on. One of these Mamluks, Izzuddin bin Aybak al-Turkmani, had ascended the throne under the title of Al-Malik al-Mu'izz in 647 after putting to sword Turan Shah, the descendant of Malik al-Saleh. So this kind of history, very, very disturbing sometimes, but we don't know the reality of why he killed this other Turan Shah, who is a descendant of Al-Malik al-Saleh. So he was a slave. You can see they were slaves, right, who took over the rule. He was succeeded by his son Nuruddin Alt when he was killed in 655 after Hijrah. So you can see that he only was a king for about 8 years only, and his son took over. Nuruddin Alt was overthrown by Saifuddin Qutz, once the prime minister of Izzuddin Aybak, in 657 after Hijrah. Well, again, 2 years later, right, the ex-prime minister overthrew Nuruddin, who succeeded his father. He was the first Mamluk Sultan who gave a crushing defeat to the Tatars. However, only a year after Saifuddin cast donned the purple. Purple means they wear this kind of purple robe to shoot at the king. He was slain by Ruknuddin Baibars, who was also a slave of Malik al-Shah Najmuddin Ayyub. So again, they were Suhana stuff. So this is the reality of life, right? You've got people who are against you. Sometimes if you are good, also they will be against you. Sometimes you've got lots of things they are against you and they want to take over, or they feel you're not doing a good job, so they just kill you off. So it's the reality of life. Baibars ascended the throne with the title of Al-Malik al-Zahir and ruled over Egypt for 18 years. So this is the person, right? He changed his name. He was Ruknuddin, and he was the one who conquered, who defeated the Tatars. He was splendid. He won splendid victories over the invading Crusaders and Tatars. When Ibn Taymiyyah was born, Egypt and Syria were ruled by Al-Malik al-Zahir Baibars, and when the latter died, Ibn Taymiyyah was 15 years of age. All right, so we've got that. He ruled for 16 years. 18 years, yeah. All right, so Baibars was the first Muslim sovereign who consolidated his forces to give many a crushing defeat to the enemies of Islam. So he joined forces, right, and he defeated the enemies of Islam. Ibn Kathir writes of him in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya. Capable, courageous, and brave, Baibars was always alive to the dangerous designs of his enemies and ready to meet a threat of any quarter. He endeavored to strengthen the disorganized Muslim power, raised by providence to reorganize and strengthen the dejected and decimated Muslim forces. He was in truth like a thorn in the flesh of the Tatars and Crusaders. This is how he was described by Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir is an historian. He was really brave. He was always aware of what's happening, all right? And he organized the Muslims forces, and he was really a big problem for the Tatars and Crusaders. So he says it's a thorn in the flesh, but there's a way of saying that he is a big problem. He put a ban on the sale of wine and expelled the hardened criminals from his dominion. So he did some good in following the tenets of Islam, and he removed criminals. He would never take rest until the wickedness or wrong brought to his notice was set right. It's his goodness, right? His good, right? He would ensure that the wrong and wicked are given the right treatment. Baibars had sway over the territories extending from the river Euphrates in the east to the farthest limits of Sudan in the south, with Egypt at the center and Cairo as its capital. So this is the territory at that time. Good for photo, be good. Large number of educational institutions established by Baibars and the presence of the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mustansir Billah in Egypt had attracted many renowned doctors of religion to Cairo, which had thus become the nerve center of political, intellectual, and cultural activities in the East. All right, so here we see him building universities, educational institutions, and it seems that the Caliph Al-Mustansir, he's no more the Caliph, but he has somehow got asylum in Egypt, and that attracted a lot of people to Cairo. Baibars was animated by a genuine feeling of love for Islam and fighting in the way of Allah, but he was arrogant and high-handed also, as the autocrat sovereigns generally are. There's a big problem there, right? Despite his love for Islam and fighting in the path of Allah, putting up the banner of Islam here and there. These things gets into people's head, and he was rather arrogant and high-handed. The analysts of his time have listed numerous acts of his haughty and despotic behavior along with the brilliant victories won by him. So there's good and bad in this guy. But at the end of the day, he's a Muslim. Allah knows best his state. And when we talk about him being arrogant, I'm quite, of course, it is, he was then, we can say then, because we don't know at the end of his life as a Muslim, as he might learn things and might change his ways and be repentant of his arrogant ways. One of these incidents relates to his regrettable misbehavior with Imam Nawawi. So here we do understand that he is, Imam Nawawi was present in this time, it was around 600 years. We are going to the hadith of Imam Nawawi, and then we have Al-Taymiyyah at the same time, although he's very young at that time, right? We would expect Imam Nawawi to be a bit more older, about 20, in his late 20s most probably, because Imam Nawawi passed away quite early, about 330 plus, very young, in his early 30s actually. So there was an incident, right? We'll go through that incident later. The kingdom of Egypt and Syria ruled for 18 long years by Baibars, so quickly changed hands after his death that 9 sultans ascended the throne within 33 years, between 676 to 709 after Hijrah. So there's a lot of chaos there, right? One taking over the other. We saw with the Mamluks, so this one killed this one killed this one take over, this one take over. So it's not really a good state. During this period, only one ruler of greed and ability presided over this Islamic kingdom. He was Al-Malik Al-Mansur Saifuddin Qalawun, who inflicted a crushing defeat on the Tatars in 678 and liberated Tripolis from the Crusaders after 185 years of Christian domination over the city. It says Tripolis is in Algeria. All right, anyways, on the north of Africa. So he did this, right? So this is of course the kings that come after Baibars. He donned the imperial purple for 12 years, from 678 to 689. But after his death, the kingdom again fell to the lot of incompetent rulers. Last, Mansur Qalawun's son, Al-Malik al-Nasir Muhammad ibn Qalawun, wielded the scepter of authority for the third time in 709 after Hijrah, and ruled over the kingdom for the next 32 years, and that's long. Muhammad ibn Qalawun was a contemporary sovereign during whose rule Ibn Taymiyyah held aloft the banner of reform and renovation. Blessed with several qualities of mind and heart like Baibars and his own father Mansur Qalawun, he became a source of unity and strength to his kingdom. So this is Allah's way. There are those who are not competent, and then after that they are overthrown, and then we have competent ones coming in. He too, like his predecessors, dealt smashing defeats upon the Tatars. In the whole of this period, Iraq, Iran, and Khorasan continued to smother under the despotic control of the Tatars. So we know Syria is under Egypt, right? And Iraq is still not there. Iran, Khorasan, so this is northern part of Iran, maybe Afghanistan area, right? So the Tatars are still having them. Baghdad was not restored to the Muslims until its Tatar ruler embraced Islam. So Baghdad was under the Tatar, but the Tatars became Muslim. We saw that also how the Tatars became Muslim. So then Baghdad became Muslim. The Abbasid Caliph of Egypt himself led an expedition against Iraq, and Baibars too made several attempts to regain Iraq, but none of these efforts proved successful. So as we saw, the Abbasid Caliph, he was from Egypt, he went to Egypt, right? And they tried, but not successful. So Mamluks, however, held the reign of government over Egypt, Sudan, Syria, and Hijaz. So the Arab Peninsula, Arabian, Saudi, around there. All right, so that's the government, the political system. Now we see the system of a government. The state religion of the Mamluk Sultanate was Islam. Kings and the nobles believed in and adored Islam. The kings and the nobles fought for its defense. Ecclesiastically, dignitaries like Qazis, and the Sheikh al-Islam were regularly appointed by the Qadi. This is Qadi, not Qazi, Qadi, appointed by the state. So they appoint Qadi, they appoint Muftis, Sheikh al-Islam, like Muftis, right? To look into the Islamic condition or the rulings on of fatwas and things like that. The Sharia was enforced as the law of the land. Educational institutions free from state control imparted religious instruction. But despite all these, the sultans are the pivot of political and military structure of government. So you've got all these religious things on the side, right, happening in the state. But so sultans still were in charge of political and military structure. All decisions ultimately rested with the king and his counselors, which sometimes even limited the operation of the Sharia laws. In its structure and organization, it was a military oligarchy without any constitution, a codified law, or a consultative body. So basically, it was under control of some individuals. Al-Malik al-Zahir Baibars and other Mamluk sultans undoubtedly always tried to obtain the support of the religious leaders. And if the ulama ever strongly opposed any measure of the government, it was postponed or given up. So they do have some respect of the ulama and the religious leaders, and they do consider when the leaders oppose. When Imam Nawawi strongly condemned the royal edict to confiscate all the fiefs of landlords in Egypt and Syria, Baibars expressed his displeasure with the Imam and forced him to leave Damascus, but he could not enforce his decision, and the status quo was maintained. So here was the unpleasant situation between Baibars and Imam Nawawi, because Imam Nawawi was against his ruling of taking from the landlords in Egypt and Syria to confiscate. Imam Nawawi doesn't agree with that. So Baibars sort of asked him to leave and not happy with him for his decision. However, he was still not able to enforce his decision. The entire administrative organ rested on the hereditary system, but it was often disrupted by a powerful military general. So, which it means that they inherit the rulings. The Sultanate was inherited. So it's of course not Islamic, because in Islam, the Caliphate is not supposed to be inherited. The Caliphate is supposed to be, the Caliph was supposed to be chosen by a group of wise people who have a strong foundation in the Quran and in the religion. But disrupted by a powerful military general that means there are some general would come in and kill the king, and so he gets control over, so that it's not hereditary in that sense. In fine, it was not founded on the Islamic principles of polity. So whatever it is not founded on the Islamic principles of politics. A system of government congenial to Islamic thought and spirit required the head of the state to be capable ruler, enjoying the confidence of the community. Mamluk Sultanate, just the other way, owed its existence solely to the personal greed and ambition of the rulers. So it is not according to Islamic ruling. The Mamluk traditions of absolute monarchy, powerful aristocracy, and increasing concentration of military power enabled the ambitious military leaders to wrest power whenever such an opportunity arose. So what we have here is that it's the same thing, right? Those who are ambitious, right, would actually gain control whenever they have an opportunity to topple the government. The slaves of Ayyubid dynasty took over the empire from their masters, thanks chiefly to their own effort, courage, and prowess. So this is when slaves become kings. And slaves, when they become kings, we see things happening again, right? They become arrogant, but of power. Most of them, not all, of course. Although every Mamluk sultan tried to ensure that one of his sons wielded the scepter, not to pronounce this thing, after him, the Mamluk tradition reasserted itself time and again. Whenever an opportunity was afforded, a valiant and successful general replaced the rightful prince. So this kind of is mentioned as a tradition that is quite traditional where the Mamluks are concerned, that generals take over and throughout the kings at that time. So this naturally encouraged internal conflict and civil war to get hold of the reins of government. So this naturally encouraged internal conflict and civil war to get hold of the reins of government, but the Mamluks always united to face any threat of aggression from the Tatar or the Crusaders' quarters. It's quite interesting. They among themselves, right, would try to gain power, gain control and things like that. But whenever they fight, they are all united. All right, moral and social conditions. So that was the political situation then, the moral and social conditions. The riding class of the Turkoman tribes was conscious of its superiority and kept itself aloof from the local population. It spoke Turkish dialects, so the one that's in power, they are from they are Turkoman tribes. That means Turkish tribes, and they spoke Turkish dialects and used Arabic only for offering prayers or conversing with the religious leaders and the local population. So the local population were Arabs, right? Remember, they were in control of Egypt, where the people spoke Arab, people speaks Arabic. Syria, where the people speaks Arabic. This is the two main towns, and Hijaz, of course, where the people speaks Arabic. So they do not want to be part, they do not want to assimilate, and so they keep on to their Turkish traditions. They do speak Arabic, of course, as Muslims, they do offer their prayers in Arabic. And of course, it do seems that some of them are able to converse in Arabic, but they do not converse, or conversing with the religious leaders and the local population. Sometimes there is a need to convey their directives, so they need to do it in Arabic. So that's when it is used in politics, in religion. Most of them, however, knew Arabic barely sufficient to perform the obligatory religious duties. So that's like most of us, we don't really know much Arabic. We're able to perform our salat, we recite everything in Arabic, but some of us still are not able to understand what we are reciting in our salat. The least we should do is to try to understand what we are reciting in our salat. Nevertheless, they respected the doctors of faith, the pious and the elect, constructed mosques and madrasas, and did not discriminate against anyone on grounds of race or language. So this is a good point about them, right? They do all these things. Still, the higher civil and military assignments went to the Turkoman elite. So they had this cronyism where they choose their own people to get high appointments. Similarly, most of the grandees, noblemen, and landlords holding fiefs in lieu of military services were Turkomans who made economic gains at the expense of the cultivators and laborers. So fiefs is some kind of a fine, some kind of a tax taken, right? In lieu of military services, that means they give services, so they are paid for their services. So they make money from the cultivators and laborers. An effort made by Husamuddin Lajin in 697 to redistribute the agricultural holdings for improving the economic conditions of the tillers of the soil proved abortive, as the Turkoman chiefs opposing the measure rose in revolt again. So you can see that it's not really easy. There's this one who was trying to change the system and allow the laborers and the cultivators, or here it's more the cultivators, the agricultural holdings, to gain from their own work. But those who are so used to taking taxes, right, are not happy, and so they oppose it. Another influential section of the urban population in Syria and Egypt consisted of the Tatar prisoners of war who had settled in large numbers in these lands. These countries were full of them, as Al-Maqarizi reports during the reign of Al-Malik al-Zahir Baibars, and their manners and customs had percolated into the local population. So this is really what happens in many, many places, right? The presence of outsiders, the presence of foreign elements actually infiltrate the Islamic culture and customs and cause some changes which might not be Islamic after all. They embrace Islam, no doubt they embrace Islam, no doubt, but they are also continue to adhere to their national characteristics, habits, and customs. There were really only a few examples of the new converts to Islam adopting the ethical and social ideals of their new faith, marking a total break with their past cultural traditions, manners, and morals. It's not really common, it seems, that people who embrace Islam would divorce themselves completely from their old ways, their ethical and customary ideas and such things, cultural traditions, manners, and morals. We don't see this in India, right? Elements of culture being present, right? It is not it is not against Islamic rulings, morals, then we normally just let go. But sometimes when it's against, we should not continue with such practices, which are not endorsed by Islam. There are some of the customs in marriages in the Malay community which are from the customs of the Hindus. And we should look into why these are done so that we do not end up doing things which are against Islam. In Indonesia also we see lots of customs, right, and ways of doing things which can actually which can amount to shirk. I've heard of people in Kelantan also when they go to sea, they are fishermen and they seek the help of the spirits of the sea, which is not right. Like people who goes to the jungles also, they would say they would ask permission from the inhabitants of the jungle so that they will be protected from harm. So we do that as Muslims. Of course, we have our du'as that Rasulullah has taught us when we enter such places, that we say a'udhu bi kalimatillahi tammati min sharri ma khalaq, or bismillahirrahmanirrahim la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama'i wa huwas sami'ul 'alim. These are teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right, it was a distinctive characteristic of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's companions alone who, as if transformed by a prophetic miracle, eschewed all traces of the conflict between the adopted faith and the pagan path. So he highlights that not many were able to completely separate themselves from the old customs, but the Prophet's companions were the very ones that we can see them really not embracing any of the pagan ways, because the Prophet was able to make them understand the importance of divorcing themselves from this past. They appeared in truth to have been reborn in Islam. This could not have been expected of the converts of a later age, when there was neither any arrangement for their guidance and training in the Islamic way of life, nor was the Muslim society dynamic enough to absorb and refashion the new entrance into Islam. So there's two reasons given here why it's not possible. Well, first, there is no proper guidance and training. That means there's no organizations that look into the guidance and training of these converts. And the second one, the Muslim society itself is not dynamic enough to absorb and refashion the new entrance into Islam. So, because the Muslim community itself, right, are affected by the various influences that they might encounter living with people of different cultures and systems. The social life of these Tatars, neo-Muslims, was for this reason an admixture of Islamic outlook and pagan traditions. The famous historian of Egypt, Al-Maqrizi, who has summed up all that he found floating from down the stream of time, describes the social and religious behavior of these new converts to Islam in these words. These Tatars had learned in the Muslim countries to read the Quran and adhered to the religious canons and observances, but their life was an amalgam of vices and virtues. And so they do learn, but sometimes they just cannot get out of their state. There was an ulama who was among the Tatars who were Muslims, right? He actually allowed them to drink, and when he was questioned, he said, because if they are not drunk, they will start raping. So they are Muslims, but so there is this, like, doing something which is wrong, but to protect from a greater evil. But these are only ulamas are able to do that, and we shouldn't use this by ourselves, because we do not understand the reality of the various rulings pertaining to such decisions made to allow sin to be committed in protecting others. So they subjected themselves to the decision of the chief Qadi in matters relating to prayer, fasting, poor due, zakat, hajj, charitable endowments, administration of the property of orphans, and the disputes within the ex-spouses. But in their personal matters, habits, and behavior, they follow the Mongol traditions and the laws promulgated by Genghis Khan. So that's the way it is. So this is a society at that time, right? They do not follow everything of Islam. Only certain rights are followed, rules and regulations. So they had appointed an administrator known as Hajib to adjudicate upon matters falling in the sphere of the customary law, to restore justice to the weak amongst them, and to impose sanctions against the bully and strong. So they have a certain other code of law that they followed, and they have someone appointed to ensure the implementation of this law. But this law is to restore justice to the weak and to impose sanctions against the bully and strong. Disputes within the Tatars, traders, and commercial matters, as well as those relating to property and land holdings, were also decided in accordance with their own traditional laws. The increasing tendency of the local population to adopt the Tatar usages, even to the extent of accepting some of the inept ideas, was outcome of free intermixing of the Tatars and the Arabs. So we can see that socially they're rather confused in their rulings, because the Tatars still insist on their ways of life, right, on certain aspects of their life. And so the Muslims tend to take up these rulings or ways of life, although it might be against Islam. A parallel example of the exchange of ideas culminating into a mutual absorption of each other's cultural strains and thought patterns can be seen in the contract between Europe and Asia, which first began in the battlefields during the Crusades. The contact. All right, so again, this kind of ideas, cross ideas, cross culture kind of situations, right, start occurring during the Crusades attack Asia, where the Europeans mixed with the Asians, and the Asians adopt some European ways, and the Europeans adopt some Asian ways. The free intermixing of different nationalities has thus given birth to a new society, neither Arab nor Islamic in its makeup, but which had brought to the fore new social and cultural problems. So the situation is to be handled, to be looked into, right? Because it's not it is non-Islamic, it's problematic situations. This had naturally increased manifold the responsibility of those religious doctors and reformers who abhorred any un-Islamic beliefs and practices adopted by the Muslims. They wanted to bring the Muslim society back to the path chalked out by the Quran and the Sunnah, a path treaded by the earlier preceptors in compliance with divine command. Udkhulu fi silmi kafa. Allah says, enter Islam, enter in the submission completely. You don't pick and choose what you like about the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you are a Muslim, you can say, oh, there is no force, there is no compulsion in Islam. Yes, there is no compulsion for you to become Muslim. But once you're a Muslim, you are asked by the Quran to enter it completely, enter wholly into submission. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 208. All right. We continue with Al-Wafi commentary on the Atara commentary on the 40 Nawawiyah, Sheikh Mustafa Dib Al-Bugha and Sheikh Muhyiddin Mistu, translated by Mahdi Lok. All right, we did Hadith 9, we recap Islam strongly. So Hadith 9 was a Hadith 9, we've been doing it for quite some time, right? It's about following what Rasulullah has, Rasulullah says, whatever I forbid, avoid it. Whatever I teach you or encourage you to do, you try as much as possible. And he talks about the people of old, the previous nations that are destroyed because of too many questionings and differences with the prophets. So Islam strongly rebukes those who cause disunity. They should be killed in this world and punished in the next. We've gone through various verses on that, right? Because they are considered as traitors. They are considered as instigators in the society. And most countries would not allow instigators to live. They'll be jailed, either jailed, right, or banished. You will achieve unity by adhering to the Quran and Sunnah. So we are encouraged to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. Disagreement in religion arises with argumentation and ostentation in religion. So lots of disagreement arise because people like to argue, and then they find they're arrogant, they want to win the case, they want to win the argument. So lots of disagreement occurs. Thus, we need to study the Quran and act on it. So it's very important for us to do that and not to be involved with arguments and debates and such. Differences will cause destruction to Muslims as it did to those before. Disagreement arises from vested interests without proof or reference to the Quran or Hadith. Disagreements that causes dispute are the all right. What do you mean by disagreements? Because we do understand that agreements when they come up with all kinds of opinions which are not without proof or reference to the Quran and Hadith. These are the ones that cause disunity. There are differences in fiqh, we know that, right? And maybe a little bit in aqidah also, but they have their reasons for it, and they do not cause disunity. Actually, the four mazhabs do not cause disunity. All right. So we talk about this. So we should go to Hajj at least once in our lifetime. This is because of the hadith. This hadith was also linked to another part in which this hadith was because the reason for this hadith is because this man was asking Rasulullah SAW when they were doing Hajj, whether he should do it every year, and Rasul kept quiet. So from there we conclude that people must do Hajj at least once in our lifetime. Right now, of course, condition for Hajj is that you must have the means to go, and not only the means in money, but the means in the ability to go. Right now, it's quite difficult for most people to go because there's only 600 people allowed, I think, in Singapore to go, compared to 3,000 about 2007. So that's what 15 years ago, about 3,000 Muslims were allowed. So, but if you have the means, in the sense of you have the money to go, then you should apply to go for Hajj, because you have the intention to go, but the system does not allow you. So it's not your fault if you pass on without going to Hajj, because you have applied and you want to go. So don't say, oh, but it's so long. Just apply now. Inshallah, when the time comes, you will be able to go for Hajj. Of course, in time you can go for Umrah. I go on to Hadith 10. At-tayyibu halalu syartu qabul. At-tayyib, the good. Halal is a condition for acceptance. The good, the halal, is a condition for acceptance. An Abi Hurairah qala, so from Abi Hurairah, he said, qala Rasulullah, Rasulullah SAW said, Inna Allaha tayyib, la yaqbalu illa tayyiba. Surely Allah is good, pure. Tayyib is good, pure. Not he except good, pure. Wa inna Allaha amara al-mu'minina bima amara bihil mursalin. And surely Allah, he commands the believers with whatever he commanded by it the messengers. وقال تعالى يا أيها الرسل كلوا من طيبات وأعملوا صالحا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, oh the messenger, eat of the good and do amal salih. Surah Mu'min verse 23, Surah Mu'min verse 51. وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم. O you who believe, and said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, O you who believe, eat of the good what we provided you. So you can see that this is instruction to the messenger, this is instruction to the believers. ثم ذكر الرجل يطيل السفر أشعث أغبر يمد يديه إلى السماء Ya Rab, Ya Rab, wa mat'amuhu haram, wa mashrabahu haram, wa malbasahu haram, wa ghudhi bil haram, fa anna yustajabu lah. Rawahul Muslim. The pure and lawful is a condition for acceptance. And the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, Rasulullah SAW said, Allah is pure and only accepts that which is pure. Allah has commanded the believers with which He commanded the messengers. For He exalt subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O messenger, eat of the good things and act rightly. And the exalted one has said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you who believe, eat of the good things we have provided for you. Then He mentioned a disheveled, dusty man lengthening his journey and stretching out his hands to the sky, Ya Rab, and his food is unlawful, his drink is unlawful, and his clothing is unlawful. So how can he be answered? Related by Muslim. So that's the hadith. All right, so we're going to go through the explanation. First and foremost, we are referring to the hadith itself. Muslim has related the hadith in the book of Zakat, the chapter on accepting charity from pure earnings and growing it. All right, so this hadith was included in the book of Zakat. It's under charity. And At-Tirmidhi in the book of Tafsir, the chapter concerning Surah Al-Baqarah, in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about halal and tayyiban. So this hadith was used, is put in that book of Tafsir by Al-Tirmidhi. So you've got Muslim is a muhaddithin, and also we have Tirmidhi. All right, we continue. The importance of hadith. This is one of the hadiths upon which the foundations and edifices of Islam are based. So we realize in many of the hadiths, this is already our 10th hadith. We've got another 30 hadiths to go, right? Most of the hadiths chosen by Imam Nawawi are the critical foundations of Islam and the edifices. It is a pillar concerning consuming the lawful and avoiding the unlawful. How wide and immense is its usefulness in creating a faithful society in which the individual loves for his brother what he does for himself and dislikes for his brother what he dislikes for himself. He stops at the bounds of legislation and suffices himself with the lawful, the blessed and pure, and thus he and others live in tranquility and prosperity. So this is looking into the food, not only the food, anything that is good. So it's wide and immense in its usefulness, in its creating a faithful set. So this hadith is critical because it covers a big fraction of the life of the society. Right? They are faithful society in which the individual loves for his brother what he loves for himself and dislikes for his brother what he dislikes for himself. That means there is this arrangement, as we can see, that it is between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the believers and the messengers in ensuring that food and things are good and halal. So it is. So you are thinking of your brothers also when you are instructing them, when you have this concern for this kind of food. He stops at the bounds of the legislation and suffices himself with the lawful, the blessed and pure, and thus he and others live in tranquility and prosperity. So he follows the rulings and he just concentrate. He feels he's content with the lawful. He's not going over for the unlawful, the blessed and pure. He's only looking for lawful, blessed and pure. Thus he and others live in tranquility and prosperity. All right, the language of the hadith. Inna Allah tayyib. Surely Allah is good, pure and transcendent above any defect. And tayyib is one of the Allah's exalted, beautiful names. Tayyib, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pure, above all and transcendent. La yaqbalu illa tayyiba, not he, as he only accept deeds and wealth that are free from harm and corruption or are lawful. So anything, it covers everything actually, right? Whatever you do must be pure, must be good. Intentions must be good, right? Your income must be good. Your actions must be sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Free from harm and corruption. Amara al-mu'minina bima amara bihil mursalin. Yes, make them equal in terms of the obligation to consume what is lawful. So here he commands the believers as the way he commands the Rasuls. So all of them must. It's not as, oh, the Rasuls are good. They will confine. They must do all the good things. No, every believer, right? So it's a believer. If you believe yourself as a believer, then you would want to do what the Quran wants you to do. Ash'atha is one's hair is frizzed because it has not been combed. So this is the condition of a traveler who was traveling so far and his hair are disheveled. Aghbara, the dust has changed the color of his hair because he has traveled a long way for the sake of obedience such as Hajj or Jihad. So this is not just mere traveling on a holiday, it is a travel in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either for Jihad, for Hajj, for da'wah purposes, missionary purposes, or to help to improve states of others, right? So this is under, this is a travel, where you travel so much until, you know, they are full of dust. You know, this we travel, we have dust. Yamaddu yadaihi ila sama. Yamaddu, he extended his hands, right, to the sky. So he raises his hands to the sky, asking Allah the Exalted and calling on him. فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. How and how, from where can he be answered when this is his description? So how is it? How can he be accepted for him? All right. Legal matters and other guidance from the hadith. The pure and accepted. So it's the first part of the hadith talking about pure and then accepted. The Prophet's statements, Allah is pure and only accept that which is pure, comprises deeds, wealth, statements, and doctrines. So it covers everything, right? Allah is pure. So we should also be pure in our deeds. We should be pure in our wealth. We should ensure that whatever we get is pure. In our statements, whatever we say must be good and clean things. And in our beliefs also must be good and clean. He does not accept this unless they are pure and free from harm and corruption, such as ostentation and conceit. So examples of the meaning of corruption and harm, right? You do things and you are so full of yourself, so that is not accepted. You do things and you are proud of what you did, right? That is not accepted. You do things and you remind people of your good deeds. These are not. You harm people by your words, and you cause harm and corruption, but you say you're good, you do good. Right? But at the same time, the good is mixed, is polluted, is corrupted with all kinds of evil things, right? For example, you say, you want an example like maybe, I've heard of this example. In some parts of the world, some people would teach the Quran, and then after that, they would expect the students to do a lot of housework for them and cause some unhappiness and harm. Maybe it might not harm them physically by doing the housework, but sometimes emotionally they might be harmed because they are kids. And I know of a person who actually went through such a thing, and she didn't really actually learn much, and she can't really read the Quran. So this is an example, doing good in teaching the Quran, but at the same time, you mix it with something which is not good. Like, for example, also some we are quite familiar with some countries where people teach religion and they beat children for not doing things. That is where the harm is not right. He does not accept wealth unless it is pure and lawful. So we make sure our earnings are not corrupted by elements of interest, by elements of haram elements, like, for example, we have to serve liquor and things like that. And we have to compromise with evil people, so our earnings might not be lawful. We have involved with haram businesses, so the wealth is not pure and lawful. He urged that charity be from pure lawful earnings when he said, and only accepts that which is pure. Allah does not accept charity unless it is pure and lawful. Some people, they go, they gamble, they earn money and they give sadaqah. That's not allowed. Not allowed. They steal and they give sadaqah. That's not allowed. We cannot be Robin Hoods also. They commit sins. Like for example, they commit haram acts, maybe prostitution, cheating, and things like that, and they use the money to give charity, and they believe that it is to purify their evil deeds. No, it doesn't go that way. It doesn't work that way. Speech does not reach him unless it is pure. No lies, right? No hurtful speeches, no sarcasm, no bad language, right? All these. So it covers a lot. You can see that, right? What is pure here, not only in terms of food. Allah the Exalted, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has said, إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. To him, all good words, yas'adu, rise to him, and he elevates all virtues. وَعَمَلُ صَالِحُ يَرْفَعُ, he elevates. So very important for us to say good things. And we should not, alhamdulillah, we should not use bad language, cursing language. You know, these are all of poor ahlak. To curse, to shout, and to be very, very boisterous, right? This is not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, amal saleh. Amal saleh means we have to make sure our deeds are purely done for Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. The word amal saleh describes that already. It's supposed to be understood that it is as any action that conforms with the teaching of Rasulullah SAW and also done sincerely for Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. In that case, it will be raised. All right. Good words. So always bring up our children. You know, we ourselves speak good things, and they will end up speaking good things. Alhamdulillah, my father, alhamdulillah, my father never have any curse word in his vocab. He never used any bad language, like, you know, all these 4-letter words and whatever. Or despite the fact that he grew up in a community that is like this kind of words are just there. And we grew up not using that also, alhamdulillah, because of the great influence of our father, who was very careful in the way in what he says and the words that he used. So Allah the Exalted has divided speech into pure and wretched. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has said, Alam tara kayfa daraballahu mathalan kalimatan tayyibatan kashajaratin tayyibah. Did not you see how Allah makes a metaphor? Kayfa daraballah. Allah strikes an example, a word, a good word. It's just like a good tree. It's like a good tree. As Surah Ibrahim verse 24 says, a good word. It provides, when you talk about a good tree, right? Then it has good branches, got flowers, it benefits people and everything. So Allah describes the good words. So we should be using good words all the time, right? And not get involved with all this sleazy words and this with sexual connotations and all these very bad words that people actually use. We should not. This is of ahlak, right? So Allah described it as a tree, and He said, وَمَثَلُ كَلِمَةٍ خَبِيثَةٍ كَشَجَرَةٍ خَبِيثَةٍ. And the example of a bad word is that of a rotten tree. If a rotten tree doesn't benefit anybody, it just dies, and that's it, and it smells. No one is victorious with Him apart from the pure believers. So you want to be victorious with Allah? You be careful of what you say, you be careful of what you think, you be careful of how you behave towards people, and not to cause mischief and corruption. Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has said, الَّذِينَ تَوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ طَيِّبِينَ. Those whom the malaikat caused them to die, and they are in good state. That's the angels take in a pure state. So the angels take these people when they are tayyib, they are in a pure state. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with a goodly death. We always say, Ya Allahu biha, Ya Allahu biha, Ya Allahu bihusnil khatima. You want to have a good ending. The angels greet them with peace when they enter paradise, saying, Salamun alaikum, tibtum fadkhuluha khalidin. Peace be on you. You have done good. Then enter this Jannah right forever. Peace be upon you. You have done well. So enter it timelessly forever. All right, we'll take a break here. Inshallah, we'll continue. We have Noman Ali Khan today. It's a long time since we listened to him.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأت بخير منها أو مثلها ألم تعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير ألم تعلم أن الله له ملك السماوات والأرض وما لكم من دون الله من ولي ولا نصير أم تريدون أن تسألوا رسولكم كما سئل موسى من قبل ومن يتبدل الكفر بالإيمان فقد ضل سواء السبيل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Once again, everyone, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I'm going to be speaking with you for about 15 minutes. First of all, I'd like to express how happy I am and grateful I am to have the opportunity to be in this wonderful masjid. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept all of our ibadah and reward those who take care of this masjid and spread khair by means of it. The ayat that I wanted to talk to you about today are from Surah Al-Baqarah. And there's a particular ayah that I want to get to, that's ayah number 108, in which Allah Azza wa Jal talks to the Muslims. He says, أَمْ تُرِيدُونَ أَن تَسْأَلُوا رَسُولَكُمْ كَمَا سُئِلَ مُوسَى مِن قَبْلِ. Or is it that you want to question your messenger the way Musa was questioned before? So he's asking the Muslims, do you want to treat your messenger the way Musa was treated, but specifically the way Musa used to be asked questions? Of course, the Sahaba used to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam questions all the time. So asking the Prophet questions is a big part of Islam. So many ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are a result of some Sahabi came and asked a question. And so many ayat came from the Quran when somebody came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked a question, and then the ayah came down. But here in this ayah, Allah says, do you want to ask or do you want to question your messenger the same way Musa was questioned before? So we have to learn now that there's two different kinds of questions, the kinds of questions that are encouraged. And then there are the other kinds of questions that are being prohibited. You're not supposed to ask those kinds of questions. And this is so serious that in this ayah, Allah says, وَمَنْ يَتَبَدَّلِ الْكُفْرَ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. That whoever replaces their iman, their faith, with kufr, with disbelief. Kufr means two things. It means disbelief, and it also means being ungrateful. If you replace your iman with these two things, whoever does that has gone away from the straight path or the right path. So what Allah is saying here is, if you ask the wrong kinds of questions, you will replace your iman with kufr. That's what Allah is saying in this ayah. So this is a pretty scary thing. I have to not only worry about how to protect my iman by asking questions, because I'm supposed to ask questions. I also have to protect my iman by not asking the wrong kinds of questions. So this is what I wanted to spend time with you trying to understand. What are the wrong kinds of questions that are being warned about in this amazing ayah? A couple of ayats before this, when I recited in the beginning, I recited a little bit before this. Allah Azza wa Jal describes something that the Yahud were saying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were basically saying, you can follow your book. We already have a book. We have Torah. So we don't need to follow your religion. We already follow ours. And in fact, even today, there are rabbis who believe that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. Even now, today, Jewish scholars accept that that the messenger is in fact the messenger of Allah, but we don't have to follow him because we have our own revelation. His revelation is for everyone else. So they developed this idea that it's okay, you can be a messenger, just not for us, because we already have Torah, we already have the teachings of Musa alayhi salam. And Allah responds to them and he says, مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا نَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْهَا أَوْ مِثْلِهَا. That actually, now that this messenger has come, we don't cancel any previous ayah or make it forgotten, except that we bring something better or something just like it. In other words, now the Torah no longer applies. It's now been canceled. It's been replaced by something that has the same thing as the Torah or has even better than the Torah. That's the Quran. That's what Allah tells Bani Israel. مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها ألم تعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. Now this is going to help us understand the wrong kinds of questions a little bit, because my subject was, how do you make sure you don't ask the wrong kinds of questions? The Israelites, Banu Israel, Allah talks about them so much because we're supposed to learn a lot from them. We're supposed to learn from their mistakes. And one of their mistakes was the way that they used to ask questions of their own prophet. Whatever came in their head, they want to ask about it. Whatever curiosity they have, they want to come and ask about it. Even in the narrations we find in the Quran, sometimes the Yahud would come to the Prophet ﷺ, the Banu Israel would come in Medina and they would say, oh yeah, how come sometimes a baby boy is born? How come sometimes a baby girl is born? Then sometimes they'll come and ask, so who are these people of the cave? Who are these people? Or tell us about this, tell us about that. Oh yeah, give me this answer, give me this answer. In other words, whatever question comes in their head, they say, we're gonna ask. And if you don't have the answer, you have a problem. Now let's pause for a second. I don't want to talk about Bani Israel, I want to talk about us. I have people come to me and say, Ustad, you do research, right? I'm like, yeah, I do research. I got a question. I asked a lot of scholars. Nobody has the answer to this question. Let me ask you this question. This has happened to me hundreds of times. People very proud of their question because nobody can answer their question. And you know what? Even if you give them the answer, they're like, they're going to go to the next guy and say, I asked a lot of people this question. Nobody got the answer to my question. Let me ask you this question too. This obsession with one question, then another question, then another question. So let's take a step back. Where do questions come from? The real issue is, where do questions come from? Whatever you're thinking about, wherever your mind goes, that's the direction that your questions are going to come from. If you're thinking about cars all the time, you're going to have questions about cars. If you're thinking about money all the time, you're going to have questions about making money. Wherever your mind is focused, that's where questions arise from. Now, the issue is, what Allah gave us in his revelation, what he gave us in the Quran, he gave us a book. It's not a book of answers for your questions. It didn't come to address, it's not Google. It's not Allah's revealed Google for you. Whatever question I have, I'm just going to ask and Allah will have the answer for me, because my mind goes in every direction, which means I'm going to keep asking questions that are going in every direction. And the problem with that is there is no straightforward direction. So what I want you to do now in these few minutes, I want you to understand the right way of asking questions by way of an example. I'm going to try to give you an example. Stay with me. Try to focus on this example. Inshallah, the concept will become clear.
Right, we'll continue next week on how to identify good questions and bad questions. And we went through that in our lesson last week, the last hadith, that is number 9, talking about asking too many questions. And that's why this video is good for us, inshallah. Helps us to understand things better, inshallah. All right, we continue with the explanation of the hadith. Regarding the end of this general meaning of the statement and only accepts that which is pure, Ibn Rajab said all the believer is pure in his heart. His heart is all part. This is talking about a believer. When they use the word mu'min, the hadith uses the word mu'min. Mu'min is a one who is a believer at all times. There is no moment in his life that he is not a believer. There's a mu'min, because a mu'min is what we call an ism, a noun. A noun has got no time frame, right? You are a teacher, whether you're teaching or not, you're still a teacher. All right, it's got a noun. But if Allah sometimes in the Quran, Allah says, Alladhina aman, those they believed. So at times, right, they might commit sin. So once you are committing sins, the Prophet said that the moment you commit sin, at that point in time, the belief in your heart has left. Because if you really believe that Allah is your God and you are a slave of Allah, you would never, ever, ever disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that at times you choose to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it means that you have a slight disbelief in you at that point in time. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, at the point of committing a sin, you are a disbeliever at that point. And then we seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's why we are true believers are very careful in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if he is a believer, is pure. The believer is pure. His heart, his tongue, and his body, right? That means his heart doesn't have bad thoughts, all good things. Tongue doesn't say bad things. Right? His body is made up of good halal things because of the faith that abides in his heart. Because of the faith that is in his heart, every part of him is pure. Manifests his tongue in remembrance. So his tongue is always in the sense of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't have to be zikir. You don't have to zikir all the time to be that. You are in a constant state. When you don't say bad things, you are actually remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you know that Allah doesn't like you to say bad, evil things or dirty things and using foul languages and such. In his limbs through righteous actions. So he does good things with his limbs, which are the fruit of faith and come under his name. So that's purity. All right, so that's an example of purity. How can these be accepted and pure? So how can the deeds be accepted and pure? One of the greatest matters that makes a believer's deeds pure and accepted is that his food is lawful. So very important is that your food must be lawful. Because if you take unlawful food, then everything about you becomes unlawful. And what does it mean? Lawful food? Lawful food doesn't only cover halal, as in something which is okay for Muslims to eat, but it covers earnings also. When your earnings are not halal, then the food that you buy with those earnings becomes not halal also. It becomes unlawful. The hadith bears evidence that these are not accepted unless one eats what is lawful, and that the unlawful corrupt actions and prevent their acceptance. So the deeds are not accepted unless one eats what is lawful. So unless your food is lawful, as mentioned, it's not only lawful as in halal, there's a halal sign there, but make sure it is the money obtained to buy the food is from halal sources, and that the unlawful corrupt actions, right, and that because of your unlawful food, your actions become corrupt and prevents acceptance. This is because Rasulullah SAW, after affirming that Allah is pure and only accepts that which is pure, says, Allah has commanded the believers with which He commanded the messengers. And Allah the Exalted has said, Ya ayyuhar rasul, kulu min tayyibati wa'malu salihan. So by reference to this verse, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah stated in saying that Allah accepts pure and only accepts that which is pure. This verse, as you can see, talks about food and then talks about amal salih. So if your food is not pure, then your amal is not salih, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu kulu min tayyibat ma razaqnakum. So eat of the good whatever Allah has provided you. Right. This means that the messengers and their ummas are commanded to eat good, pure things and are lawful and to act rightly. So two things instruction, good food, good actions, righteous actions. Well, as long as the food is lawful, the deeds are righteous. That means your deeds cannot be considered as righteous. So that means there is another condition for righteous deeds, right? Amal saleh, first, it must be in accordance with the teachings of Rasulullah. Second, it must be sincere for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Third, right, your food must be from lawful sources, or else your deeds are not considered as righteous deeds. If the food is not lawful, then how can the action be accepted? Then it's not a righteous deed. At-Tabarani has narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who said, I recited this verse in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is a narration from Ibn Abbas, who said he recited this particular verse in the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ya ayyuhan nasu kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiba. Now this is not the believers, but men. Oh, you men, oh man, each of what is in the earth, halal and tayyib. So men are also instructed to eat halal and good food. So actually, when we buy non-halal things, we should not give non-Muslims, right? Because it's an instruction from Allah that mankind must eat halal and good food. So we should throw it away. If it's not halal, it has to be thrown away, not to be given. So, oh, never mind, they're all not Muslim, they can eat non-halal food. No, we can't do that. This is a responsibility on us to ensure that we do not give anybody that's anything that's bad. What is just not halal, it is bad. So we do not give bad things to people. Because Allah just doesn't only say halal, but He puts the word tayyib. So we must be very careful. Our food is good and halal. We see lots of halal signs, halal labels everywhere among the food, but other food really, really good. You need to consider the goodness of the food, right? Maybe if you look at sausages, how good are sausages? What's in the sausage, right? Yeah, it's something interesting to eat, something delicious. Maybe when you put all the sauces and everything, and so many people are eating sausages all the time. It's bad actually for the health and the process of making it burgers and everything. You know, burgers, they use all kinds of things just to fill up the burger. And, also other things, of course, food, GM foods. Nobody knows the evil of the GM food. We try to minimize food to pure food, and du'as will be accepted. So people are wondering why the du'as are not accepted, because their food is not tayyib, maybe halal but not tayyib. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu then stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, ask Allah to make me from those whose supplication are answered. Rasulullah replied, O Sa'ad, purify your food and your supplications will be answered. So you want our du'as to be accepted, right? Take care of both. Very important. By the one in whose hand is Muhammad's soul, the slave will toss a morsel of the unlawful in his belly, and his deeds will not be accepted for 40 days. So this is really frightening, right? Eat something which is not halal, and then Allah will not accept your deeds. So Allah has linked eating halal food with acceptance of it. So if you don't go around and just eat whatever, we have enough good food to eat, right? Don't justify eating all kinds of things out there. Any slave whose flesh has been nourished illegally is more deserving of the fire. Abu Yahya al-Qattat has related from Mujahid, from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who said Allah does not accept the prayer of someone who has something unlawful in his bed. All right, so that's a very frightening state. The lack of acceptance. Lack of acceptance can sometimes mean, in certain hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ, the lack of validity. What does that mean? For example, there is the hadith. Rasulullah ﷺ says, Allah does not accept the prayers of any one of you until you have done wudu. So there is no such acceptance here, means one must be in a purified state before praying, and thus one has carried out one's obligation. So it's not valid, the prayer is not valid because there is no wudu. Lack of acceptance can also mean, as in the case in many hadiths, the lack of rewards. Two things: lack of acceptance. Not acceptance because doesn't conform to the various conditions of the ibadah. The other one is lack of reward. For example, there is a hadith: a woman's prayer is not accepted if her husband is angry with her. Well, this makes people worry. A lot of times the husbands are angry with wives. So try not to aggravate your husbands, right? And sometimes you justify, oh, I don't really, he's just nonsensical. Nothing to be angry about, and yet he's so angry. We do reflect and think about it, and ponder what we said and make him angry, whether it's necessary to say that, to ask ourselves whether, better not to say it. That makes him angry. All right. Nor from someone who gone to a soothsayer. So the prayer of a person who goes to a soothsayer, so the magician, like bomos in the Singapore context now, bomo, magician, they're called soothsayers. Basically, they use a jinn to help them do things. Now, someone who had drunk wine for 40 days. Maybe there's a bit of a difference here. So does it mean that you drink wine for one day is okay? I've heard of people saying that if you drink a drop of wine or any alcoholic drink, hamar, right, your amal will not be accepted for 40 days. It's a drop of wine. Well, this would be conforming to the narration from Ibn Abbas, in which he says that if you have any non-halal food in your belly, your amal will not be accepted for 40 days. And the hadith, and only accepts that which is pure, and the hadith, whoever prays in a garment whose price is 10 unlawful dirhams, this prayer is not accepted. So again, right, clothing is also very important. Right? When you pray in the clothing that is haram, you steal your clothing, haram, right? It's not yours. You steal it and you pray in it, it's not halal. All right, you buy clothing. So when is haram clothing? Of course, when you talk about haram clothing, you always think about the dress itself, the clothing that doesn't cover the aurat, that's haram clothing. But here it's talking about clothing being haram because the money used to buy the clothing is from haram sources. What is meant here is a lack of completion that would necessitate reward for this action, even though they are accepted in terms of obligations being fulfilled. So he's saying that it's not good enough because of the haram elements present. He says, but maybe it will be accepted, even though they are accepted in terms of obligations being fulfilled. Like, for example, you pray in a haram clothes, prayer is accepted, right? You have done your obligation, but how much of the reward you get, that is another thing. You have done your obligation. For us, we pray 5 times a day. Yes, we have done our obligation to pray 5 times a day, but how good it is depends on the quality of our salat. So, distinguishing between the two is based on external evidences. So to find out this, right, we need external evidences, that means to see whether it's halal or not halal. That means whether the two is acceptance, as in the first part is that it doesn't have all the conditions there, so it's not valid. and the other one is whether there is any haram elements in it. How does a Muslim rid himself of the unlawful? After being unable to discover who the owner or to find him, a Muslim can rid himself of unlawful wealth by giving it away in charity, and the reward goes to the owner. This is about using things which are not yours, right? You found something and you just, okay, that's yours. You say, finders keepers. No, that's not the way we Muslims behave, because it's not ours. It is haram for us to take it and use it. So we need to get rid of it by giving it away in charity, and the reward goes to the owner. It has been related, Malik ibn Dinar, he said, I asked Ata bin Ibn Abi Rabah about, these are all pious people quoted what they say, knowledge, lots of knowledge also, but someone who has some unlawful wealth and he does not know who the owners are. So here we see that we're not sure of who the actual owners are. He replied, he should give it away in charity. I'm not saying that suffices him. He's saying that just give it to charity, but Allah knows best. I'm basically not sure what's the reality. The well-known position of Ash-Shafi'i regarding unlawful wealth is that it is put away and not given in charity until it becomes clear who deserves it. Right? So you can't give it to charity, but you must give the charity to one that really deserves it. Al-Fudail ibn Iyad, this is another religious one, held the position that someone who has unlawful wealth, whose owner is not known, should destroy it and toss it in the sea, not give it in charity. These are opinions again. Just to be safe, just throw it away. One does not draw near to Allah except with that which is pure. So because he feels that this thing is not pure, it's not yours to do whatever you want to do with it. So you cannot get any good by the charity. Rajab said the correct position is that it is given in the charity because destroying wealth and wasting it is forbidden. So that is another opinion again. That is why some people, we talk about this halal thing. Some people, they're very careful about the interest earned from their savings. So they take the interest and they use it to pay for their road tax, maybe pay for things which are not really critical for them. They don't buy clothes with it, they give it away to people. And for example, some people get donations, some organizations, and they get donations from the pools. The pools are the gambling organization. They encourage gambling, where they have the toto and things like that. So some organizations actually, Muslim organizations actually receive money from them as beneficiaries, and they have quite consulted MUIS, and MUIS say you can take the money and split the Baitul Mal, and then the Baitul Mal will dispense to the organizations accordingly. This is on the grounds that we do not waste money. So there are differences of opinions, right? Yes.
Assalamualaikum. I can share opinions that I know on this.
Yeah, on interest.
Yeah, on cleansing haram income or interest that we have.
Yeah, sure.
So the last one is from my understanding, is universally accepted in Islamic finance that you should give it to charity because you don't want to waste whatever. I mean, even though it's haram, you should give it to charity. But when you give it to charity, you have to bear in mind that we're not actually getting pahala for doing charity. We're just throwing it away in a way that creates benefit for others, not for us. We don't get the pahala of giving charity. We get the pahala of cleansing our wealth, but we don't get the pahala of giving charity because it's not our money in the first place, it's haram money. Yeah, so that's the thinking. And the only other caveat or guidance that I know of is when charities receive it, they can use it anyway, but they're encouraged not to use it for religious purposes. For example, building a mosque. They can use it to feed people and all that, but preferably not for religious purposes like printing Quran or building a mosque. Yeah, that's the basic guidance that I know from the Sharia advisors.
So in that case, we would need to, the one who receives the charity should know that the charity is not of a halal source.
I believe so, but the Baitul Mal approach in Singapore, I'm not sure. I've not looked into that.
Because that's what we understand. You see, we are allowed to put the money into Baitul Mal and then we withdraw from the Baitul Mal from it because they call it cleansing, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe in the Singapore context, that's the way to do it. But in general, the person receiving it or the organization receiving it, they should know lah, that they should be told that this is haram income given from us. So you can use it whichever way you want. Preferably, we should advise them, preferably not for religious use. So I shared one campaign. We have a running campaign where whoever wants to give away their cleanse their haram monies. Like, I even know people who give away, I mean, you know who also, who give away their entire CPF. That one is a different level lah.
Not entire CPF. The CPF that he presumes was from interest.
Oh yeah, not entire. He overestimated by a lot. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. He wants to cleanse. He wants to make sure it's as clear as possible. Some people like to play safe. They give more, better give more rather than give less.
Yeah.
All right, so that's talking about wealth. All right, so setting it aside indefinitely makes it liable to destruction and transgressors confiscating it. So we cannot set it aside indefinitely. We have to do something about it. There are some direction says that you got to keep it. You got to announce to people if you found anything like money announce, and after 1 year, if nobody claims, you can take it. Wallahu alam lah. So very different opinions. You can see these are all very differences of opinions. So rather, it should be given as charity on behalf of its owner so that he can benefit from it in the hereafter as he was unable to benefit from it in this life. So there's another position. So you find money, use it, give it sadaqah because it's not yours to use it. Like you fear that it might be unlawful, so you just give it sadaqah. The owner will benefit from it. All right, thank you, Omar, for the clarification or additional information there. All right, the reasons for supplication being answered. Traveling a long distance. So now we're looking at the story that we have here, right, of this man who traveled a very far distance. His hair is also disheveled and then dusty and everything, right? So one of the conditions is traveling. Not traveling for fun, traveling da'wah or doing any amal saleh in the travel. Traveling itself necessitates that supplications be answered for Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, and At-Tirmidhi, as related from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that Rasulullah said, 3 supplications are answered and there is no doubt about them. The supplication of the oppressed. So don't oppress people because they make dua and that's it, you're gone. Supplication of a traveler, right? And the supplication of the parent for his child. Inshallah, parents, some ulama will say parents sometimes have a state of the level of wali where the du'as are concerned. So that is why parents should make good du'as and don't start cursing your children because that is dangerous. If a travel is far, the supplication is closer to being answered because it is when one expects to be broken of spirit due to being absent from one's homeland and bearing various hardships. So this is an explanation why far traveling is accepted. Of course, this is in the olden days where you travel, you walk, you have to go through various difficulties. But in this modern world, so sometimes you might go through difficulties in your travel, right? And the more difficulty you have, the easier your dua is accepted. So what kind of travels are allowed is considered as real, proper travels. Because travels, I did mention this before, we can make our intentions good in our travels. Even if you go on a holiday with a family, right? Bonding time, to have good relations with family, or you go and visit a relative, or you go and visit a sick friend. These are all good travels, and make the niyat there so that it becomes an ibadah. The brokenness of spirit is one of the greatest reasons for supplications being answered. Going through very difficult, so it shows this brokenness of spirit also can be seen in the people who are oppressed, and maybe also in parents who are being neglected by their children and things like that, or parents who really feel for their children and wants a lot for their children. Sorry for what happened. All right, so that's to be worn out in terms of one clothes and appearance. So this is we are going through that the man, right? He was traveling so far, and his clothes are also dirty and everything, and he got hair, all dust on his hair. So also I said in a well-known hadith, many a disheveled, dusty person in rags pushed back from a people's door. If he were to call on Allah, he would answer him. So This what it means that you have a beggar, dirty beggar coming to your house, and then you shut him off and throw him out, or you close the door on him, right? That is dangerous because he can answer dua and you might be, his dua might be accepted. We went out to the rain prayer in worn out clothes, humbly and submissively imploring. All right, so I think there's a missing word somewhere there in my copying of the text. All right, so basically, the clothes are worn out, he's in the rain, it's wet, and he dua, Allah says. Stretching one's hands towards the sky, it is part of the etiquette of supplication. Imam Ahmad, Abu Dawud, and Al-Tirmidhi have related from the hadith of Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu that Rasulullah said, Allah exalted is alive and generous. When a man is raising his hands towards him, he is reluctant to reject them, leaving them disappointed. That's why it was very disturbing. There was a video made by one person. I don't know what's his name. He was talking about it is wrong to raise your hands when you make a dua. The Prophet never did it. That's what he says. Oh, these youngsters out there, they hear from one person and they relate and they start condemning others who raise their hands during dua. There's many hadiths which talks about raising the hands. This particular man, he was raising his hands also towards the sky, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has encouraged us to raise our hands, right? He says that if you raise your hand, in fact, when I was in Tarim, I saw this Scottish lady. She took her wudu. After wudu, she made a dua of wudu, and she raised her hand so high, as they say, until your armpit can be seen. It's very high. And Allah will not reject your dua. During the rain prayer, Rasulullah would raise his hand so high that the white of his armpit could be seen. On the day of Badr, when he was asking Allah for victory, he raised his hand so high that his outer garment fell from his shoulders. So if you have this outer garment, if you raise it so high, right, it might just slip. It's just like a shawl kind of thing, right? Because you raise it up so high, it slips. So just to show, just to illustrate how high he raised his hands. To ask Allah earnestly, and that is by repeatedly mentioning his lordship. This is one of the greatest things required for having supplications answered. Bazzar has related from the hadith of Rasul Aisha from the Prophet ﷺ. When the slave says, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab, Ya Rab 4 times, Allah says, I'm here, my slave, ask you, and will begin. So you asked, ask, stop, you, and will begin. All right. So that's it. Right? He did that. He said, Ya Rab, but his dua was not answered. What prevents supplication from being answered? In this hadith, he is pointing out that engaging extensively in the unlawful, be it food, drink, clothing, nourishment, prevents supplication from being answered. So be very careful of how you earn your living. His statement, so how can he be answered? Is an expression of wonder and deeming something unlikely in the form of question. How is it possible for me to do it? That kind of thing. I don't have all the tools. That kind of thing. See? It is not a clear text stating that such supplications can't be answered. So it is not saying that it won't be answered, but it said, how can it be answered? Chances of it is not very high because of his state. Supplication is the essence of worship. Because the supplication person only calls on Allah when has lost all of the hope of anyone else helping him, and that is the reality of tawheed and sincerity. It is said that the dua is a weapon of a believer. Some people, I've come across people who says, I don't dua. So why you don't dua? Well, because Allah knows what I want, and Allah knows everything. Why should I dua? Just leave it to him to do whatever he wants to give me. But in the dua, if the dua is not necessary, why is there so many duas from Rasulullah SAW? Dua after eating, dua after wudu, dua after azan, dua in so many situations. And he has this whole set of duas, amazing duas, dua morning. The zikr also is one thing, but dua also is anything. Once you say, Ya Rab, Allahumma, all these are duas. The Quran also mentions duas. Right? So how can you say you don't dua? Even your Fatiha, you dua. Although it's not a direct dua where you say, Ihdina siratal mustaqim. It is dua. You ask him, guide us, right? In the siratal mustaqim. So, and Rasulullah has encouraged us to make duas. Make as much du'as as possible. Why? In du'a, you believe that Allah is the only one that can help. And you are sincere doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is the essence of worship. There is no worship beyond that. So dua is critical. As believers, it humbles you knowing that only Allah can help you, that you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have Qul Huwallahu Ahad. And this is the surah of Surah Al-Ikhlas. Ikhlas means exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people misunderstand the word ikhlas, or they saw it in one plane, in one meaning only, not the meaning that it is exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This ikhlas is sincere. Sincere is what? Exclusively for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the surah is Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So it's talking about Allah as the one, Allahu Samad. So when you talk about Samad, Samad means it's the one whom we need, the one whom we turn to. So that is Samad, Allah. So that in itself tells us we must make dua because we need Allah. And the more dua you make, the more you realize how much you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hadith strongly encourages spending out from that which is lawful and prohibits spending out from anything else. Whoever wants to supplicate must pay attention to the lawful in what he eats and wears so that his supplication can be accepted. Allah accepts it from the believers when they spend out from that which is pure, and He causes it to grow and He blesses them therein. So these are the final points, given 10 points altogether on this hadith, and Alhamdulillah, we have completed hadith. All right, I'm not sure I'll have time to go through Surah Sabah. Let's just go through it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We can recap verses 42 and 43. On that day, none will profit or harm any. And just one will be told to taste the punishment or the fire which they deny. So this is the reality, right? The day where they cannot benefit, none can benefit anyone, and they will be punished. When Allah's ayahs are recited to them, they say that it's just a man who wants to bring them away from what their forefathers worshipped. This is a state when Rasulullah recite the ayat, they denounce Rasulullah as just a man who wants to bring them away from their forefathers. From what? From their gods, basically. They say it is fabricated lie. Disbelievers say of the truth that it is clear magic. So this is a state they deny the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we go on to the next verse. وَمَا آتَيْنَاهُمْ مِنْ كُتُبٍ يَدْرُسُونَهَا. And not we gave them any book, they study them. Wama arsalna, and not we send ilayhim to them qablaka, before you, min nadhir, any warner. And we have not given them any book which they read, nor any did we send to them before you a warner. All right. So Allah is telling us that He has never sent them any book. This is referring to the Quraysh, the Arabs. They were not given any book which they can study. So they were not given any book which they can study. How can they consider it fabrication, magic, and things like that, right? Let's look at the translation. Okay, the Quran exposes them, as it states that they were not given books in the past, so as to evaluate new ones and judge revelation. So they were never given books. So how do you know this is not a good book? How do you know it's not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Of course, where the Jews are concerned, they were given books before, and the Quran has mentioned that the Jews knew the Quran as well as they knew their sons. That means they could see through it, they could see for clearly that it is a book from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, they have no means to say that they now that what they now receive was neither revelation nor a divine book. They have no reason to denounce it and say that it's not a revelation or a divine. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ قَبْلَكَ مِنْ نَذِيرٍ, and not we send to them, especially to them, before you. So we know before Rasulullah, of course, to these people who are not min nadhir, any warner. So it's about warning them about, so nadhir, to warn them against their practices. So we do understand where the Arabs are concerned, they had prophets like Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. After that, we do not know of any prophet that was sent to the Arabs. And we do know that the Arabs started their polytheistic behavior, introducing gods into the Kaaba, right, after some time after Nabi Ismail alayhi salam. So in that sense, we would say that Ismail and Ibrahim doesn't need to warn the people of Mecca. At that time, the population of Mecca was very small, and Ismail was the leader of the people of Mecca, and they were observant Muslims at that time. So it's only after some time, and these people then, from then on, after they started all their polytheistic acts, that there were no warner at all. So how do they know? Similarly, they do not have any messengers before Rasulullah. So some of their claims are devoid of substance. They used to wish for that and say, if only a warner comes to us, a book is revealed to us, we will be more guided than others. Now, these Arabs, as mentioned before, they were they had contacts with people of the book. And they went to, of course, in Medina, there are the Jews, and they went to Syria. There's Christians along the way, many Christians along the way. We know the story of the Rasulullah's and Bakhira, who was a Christian monk who could recognize Rasulullah as the last prophet. So they were envious of these people who had books, and they actually wanted books for themselves. When Allah blessed them with that, they disbelieved him and stubbornly rejected him. So that's the case of the Arabs. And Allah denounces a statement that this book is not divine, this book is fabricated, this book is a book of magic, right? By saying that they have no way to judge the book and analyze the book. At one time he says this new invitation is untrue. At a time he says the religion of your ancestors must not be lost. And sometimes he calls the bringer of the new invitation a sorcerer. So he's other confused, right? In his statements, you can see very fickle in how he sees the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the one who relies only on his own thought and without any heavenly revelation and without having any knowledge, delivers some vanities, has no right to judge like that. So these are the people who have just used their thinking, right, without any heavenly revelation and without any knowledge, and they just give things out of their own self-interest or self-wonder, whatever, right? We have no right to judge them. This point is also understood from this verse that by relying only on the power of his own intellect, one cannot pave the difficult path of life successfully. So your own intellect cannot allow you to be successful in this life. Successful in this life means successful in the next world. But you must get help from the power of revelation, and with the aid of the leadership of the Prophet ﷺ, steps in the way, else there is darkness, and you must be afraid of the danger of aberration. So people are warned that you need guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the warner is necessary for us to live life so that we will not be plunged into a life of being astray or disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this verse expresses favor to the opponents and sorrow at the attitude of not giving due regard to this favor. So favor to the people of the Muslims, right, who are opponents to this, who are against the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of the favor. Before this, neither did the Almighty give them any book which could have guided and instructed them, nor prior to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did ever a prophet came to them who would have awoken them from their slumber to warn them of their wrong way of living. Hence, it was only befitting that they should have given due importance to this great favor of Allah and welcomed it. It could have been well guided by it in the affairs of this world and also earned the kingdom of the next world. So Allah is saying that this is a gift. This is the first time ever you're given a book and a messenger and a warner for your life. Yet they are opposing it and inviting the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the established practice of Allah, his wrath necessarily visits a nation which denies his messenger. The act yad'urusunaha, which qualifies the word kutub, the books, points to the fact that till then these people had not been given divine scriptures like the Israelites so that they could read and teach them. They could read and teach them. The guidance given to them through Ibrahim was almost forgotten with the passage of time, and the plethora of religious innovations had badly distorted their religion. It was Allah's intention that by giving them his book, he complete his favor on them. But they denied it, they rejected it, they find excuses to denounce the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, it is a pity that these people are regarding it to be magic and fabrication. All right, we'll stop. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي فاغفر لي إنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربنا انفعنا بما علمتنا ربي علمنا الذي ينفعنا ربي فقهنا وفقه أهلنا وقرابات لنا في ديننا مع أهل القتر أنثى وذكر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب